The wheels touched down in Port Briar and my phone buzzed with a command from my father to stay away from the family hotel. He sent it 3 minutes after landing, oblivious that the daughter he was banning now owned the building he bragged about. So when my sister later screamed for me to get out of this luxury hotel, and threw $500 in my face, I just smiled. By midnight, they would be the ones learning exactly what it means to leave. My name is Nora Jones. It is the name on my passport, the name on the deed to my apartment in Manhattan, and the name on the signature line of the acquisition documents that currently sit in a secure server in Zurich. It is a name that commands respect in boardrooms from London to Singapore, usually accompanied by a firm handshake and a stiff drink. But here in Port Briar, as the wheels of the plane kissed the tarmac and the humid air of the coast settled around the fuselage, I was not Nora Jones, the partner at Stonehaven Equity Group. I was simply the prodigal failure returning to the scene of the crime. My phone vibrated in my hand before the seatbelt sign even turned off. I looked down at the screen. The message was from Malcolm Blackwell. It had arrived exactly 3 minutes after touchdown, which meant he was tracking the flight. The message was short, brutal, and entirely predictable. Do not set foot in the family hotel. We are celebrating and we do not need your bad luck poisoning the air. I stared at the screen and felt the corner of my mouth twitch. It was not a smile of joy, nor was it a grimace of pain. It was the expression of a hunter who realizes the prey has just walked directly into the trap. He called it the family hotel. He called it his legacy. He had no idea that the banknotes he had leveraged to keep the lights on had been purchased 6 months ago by a shell company controlled entirely by me. He was banning the landlord from her own property. I exited the airport and hailed a car, giving the driver the address for the Cobalt Key Tower. The ride was short when the tower came into view, piercing the skyline with its blue-tinted glass and aggressive architecture. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. This was where I had grown up, hidden in the shadows of hallways, told to be quiet, told to be invisible. Today, I would be visible. I had dressed for war. Though to the untrained eye it looked like I had dressed for a casual business lunch. I wore a charcoal cashmere sweater that cost more than a mid-size sedan, paired with tailored trousers and a trench coat that whispered rather than screamed. No logos. No flash. In the world of the Blackwells, it did not sparkle. It did not cost money. That was their first mistake. They confused volume with value. The doorman hesitated as I approached the revolving glass doors of the Ivory Crest Hotel. He was new, young, and clearly terrified of making a mistake on a big weekend. I gave him a polite nod, the kind that says I belong here, and he stepped aside. The lobby was an assault on the senses. It smelled of excessive lees and floor wax. The marble floors had been polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen explosions from the ceiling. But the centerpiece of the room was the banner. It stretched across the mezzanine balcony, a monstrosity of gold lettering on velvet, celebrating 30 years of excellence. Malcolm and Veronica Blackwell. It was gaudy. It was desperate. It was perfect. I gripped the handle of my leather carry-on and began the long walk across the lobby. I could feel eyes on me. The staff at the front desk stiffened. They recognized me. Or at least they recognized the ghost of the girl who used to live here. I saw the concierge reach for a phone, likely to warn the penthouse that the exile had breached the perimeter. I did not make it to the elevators. I told security to keep the trash on the sidewalk. The voice cut through the ambient piano music like a serrated knife. I stopped and turned slowly. Veronica Blackwell was standing near the entrance to the VIP lounge holding a flute of champagne. She looked immaculate in the way a wax figure looks immaculate. Her dress was silver, tight enough to restrict breathing and covered in sequins that caught the light aggressively. Her face was pulled tight, the result of excellent surgery and a complete lack of genuine warmth. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with the venom in hers. She marched toward me, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the stone. Do not call me that. Not here. Not when we have important guests. She stopped 3 feet away, looking me up and down with a sneer of absolute disgust. Look at you. You look gray. Dull. I prefer the term understated, I replied. You look poor. She corrected, taking a sip of her drink. I told Malcolm you would come crawling back eventually. No husband. No career. Just a 34-year-old failure dragging a suitcase around because she has nowhere else to go. Did the money run out? Nora, did you come here to beg for a room in the servants' quarters? I tightened my grip on the suitcase handle but kept my face completely blank. I am here for business. Veronica. Nothing more. Business. She laughed. A harsh barking sound that drew the attention of several guests near the fountain. You do not have business. You have delusions. You are a stain on this weekend. We are launching the Legacy Growth Gala tonight. We have investors from all over the state. I will not have you moping around the lobby in your drab little outfit, scaring away the wealth. Before I could respond, the elevator doors behind her chimed. I saw them step out, and the picture of family dysfunction was complete. Tessa, my older sister, looked like a carbon copy of our mother, just 20 years younger and twice as vicious. She was holding her phone up, the ring light attached to the case, blindingly bright. Beside her was Gideon Shaw, her husband. Gideon was handsome in a generic catalog model sort of way, wearing a suit that was too shiny and a watch that was too big. Oh my God. Sha. You will not believe who just crashed the party, Tessa said to her phone, her voice pitching up into that fake bubbly influencer tone she had perfected. She walked right up to us, the camera lens inches from my face. It is my baby sister, the one I told you about, the one who ran away to find herself and only found a midlife crisis early. She laughed, looking at the screen to read the comments rolling in. Yet, she looks tired. I know. Set, right? Gideon stepped up beside her, sliding his hands into his pockets. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and amusement. Nora, bold move showing up here. Malcolm is going to have an aneurysm. Hello. Gideon, I said, still playing the beautiful son-in-law. I see. His smile faltered for a second, then returned. Sharper this time. Better than playing the homeless stray. He pulled a silver money clip from his pocket. It was thick with cash. He peeled off 5 bills. Look. We do not want a scene. We have serious people coming in and out of here. Why don't you take this and go find a motel out on the highway? Somewhere you fit in. He let go. The bills fluttered down. $500. They hit the polished marble floor with a soft slap. The lobby went silent. The piano player stopped mid-measure. Guests turned to watch. The staff behind the desk froze. It was a piece of theater designed to break me, to reduce me to the desperate child they remembered. Tessa zoomed in on the money, then panned up to my face. Take it. Nora. Seriously. Gideon is being generous. You probably haven't seen $500 in one place in years. I looked at the money. Ben Franklin stared back up at me from the cold floor. Then I looked at Gideon. He was smirking, waiting for me to bend the knee, waiting for me to scramble for the cash so they could have their story, their content, their victory. I do not need your money, Gideon, I said quietly. Of course you do, Tessa screamed, her voice suddenly losing its influencer polish and revealing the shrill anger beneath. You have nothing. You are nothing. We built this brand while you were off playing pretend. So pick it up and get out. She stepped closer, her face contorted with rage, shouting the words that would seal their fate. Get out of this luxury hotel. She grabbed the remaining stack of cash from Gideon's hand and threw it at me. The bills hit my chest and scattered, raining down around my feet like confetti at a funeral. Get out. She shrieked again. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I simply moved my right foot forward and placed the heel of my shoe directly onto the face of the $100 bill Gideon had dropped first. I put my weight on it. I felt the paper grind against the stone. I am not going anywhere, I said. My voice was not loud, but in the silence of the lobby, it carried to the rafters. Security, Veronica yelled, waving her empty champagne glass at the head of the security team. A man named Darius Cole. I knew Darius. We had started working here the same year. Back when I was scrubbing floors and he was checking IDs. Darius, remove this trespasser. She is harassing the guests. Darius hesitated. He looked at Malcolm, who had just appeared on the mezzanine level, red-faced and furious. Then he looked at me. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, perhaps even a question. But he began to walk toward us, his hand on his radio. He had a job to do. And as far as he knew, Malcolm signed the checks. I did not wait for him to reach me. I pulled my phone from my trench coat pocket. I did not look at my mother or my sister or the brother-in-law who thought $500 was a life-changing sum. I looked down at the secure messaging app that connected directly to the Stonehaven operational server. I typed a single command: activate protocol slate target. Ivory Crest Hospitality mainframe revoke all Blackwell executive clearance and VIP privileges. Effective 12 tonight. I hit send. The message delivered instantly. Somewhere in a server farm in Virginia, a line of code was executed that would turn their golden carriages into pumpkins the moment the clock struck midnight. You are making a mistake, Gideon said, stepping closer, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me. When Malcolm comes down here, he is going to have you thrown out into the street physically. Let him try, I said. I looked up. High in the corner of the lobby ceiling, a dome security camera blinked with a steady red light. I knew that camera fed directly into the main security hub in the basement. I knew that within hours that hub would be under the control of my team. I looked directly into the lens and offered a small cold smile. Go ahead. Thought, my internal voice calm and deadly. Scream. Throw money. Post your videos. Enjoy the champagne and the illusion of power because the timer has started. Get out. Tessa yelled one last time, desperate for a reaction for her live stream. You keep saying that. I murmured mostly to myself as I watched the security team close in. But by the time the sun comes up, you are going to realize that you are standing in my house, shouting at the landlord. I stood my ground on the money. The text message sent. The trap primed. Tonight, the Ivory Crest Hotel would stop being their kingdom and start being their cage. And they would learn that the only thing more dangerous than a woman with nothing to lose is a woman who secretly owns everything they love. The security guard, a man whose name tag read Miller, was 2 steps away from putting his hand on my shoulder. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He did not want to manhandle a woman who was standing so still, so calmly. But he had a direct order from the family whose name was plastered on the banner above us. To him, the Blackwells were the gods of this little universe, and I was just the atheist crashing their temple. Mom, I am going to have to ask you to come with me, Miller said, reaching for my elbow. Stop. The word did not come from me. It came from behind the security line. Sharp and breathless. Mara Keaton, the general manager of the Ivory Crest, was power walking across the marble floor so fast she was nearly running. Mara was a woman of steel and spreadsheets hired by Stonehaven Equity Group 3 months ago specifically because she did not tolerate incompetence. She had no idea I was coming. Seeing me standing there surrounded by the wreckage of a family dispute and scattered banknotes must have been like seeing a ghost materialize in the middle of a quarterly review. Caton Miller said, looking relieved to have a superior officer on deck. Mr. Blackwell ordered this woman removed. She is causing a disturbance. Mara ignored him. She stopped directly in front of me, her chest heaving slightly. She looked at the money on the floor, then at the retreating backs of my family as they headed toward the elevators. And finally, she looked at me. All the blood drained from her face. "M. Jones," she whispered. Her voice trembled. She knew exactly who signed her paycheck. She knew that while the Blackwells played pretend, I was the one who could dissolve the entire hotel's board of directors with a single conference call. "We were not expecting you. I had no notification from headquarters. That was intentional, Ma," I said, keeping my voice low. I did not want the front desk staff to hear. "Walk with me now." I stepped over the scattered cash without looking down and headed toward the side corridor that led to the executive elevators. Mara fell in step beside me, signaling for Miller to stand down. The guard looked confused, but he knew better than to question the GM. "I am so sorry about what just happened in the lobby," Mara stammered as we rounded the corner away from the prying eyes of the guests. "If I had known you were arriving, I would have handled the Blackwells myself. I would have you will do nothing," I cut in. "That is the first order of the night. As far as anyone in this building is concerned, I am not Nora Jones, senior partner at Stonehaven. I am just a guest. A nobody. Do you understand?" "Yes, Jones." "But why?" "Because if they know the executioner is here, they will stop confessing," I said. We reached the private elevator bank. I pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner. It flashed green instantly. A small satisfying confirmation that while my father might ban me from the lobby, the building itself recognized its master. We rode in silence to the top floor. The executive level was a different world from the gaudy gold-plated aesthetic my parents preferred in the public areas. Up here it was cool grays, dark wood, and the hum of serious money. The air smelled of espresso and ozone. I walked straight into the main conference room. "Get Darius Cole up here and get the internal legal counsel. I want the room sealed in 5 minutes." Mara nodded and scrambled for her phone. By the time I had set up my laptop and connected to the secure internal network, the room was populated. Darius Cole, the head of security, walked in looking wary. He was a big man, former military, who respected chain of command above all else. When he saw me sitting at the head of the table, the seat usually reserved for the visiting regional director, he paused. "Darius," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Close the door." "M. Blackwell?" he asked using my family name. "It is MS. Jones," corrected him, finally meeting his eyes. "And tonight, I am the person who decides if you keep your pension." I turned the laptop screen around so they could all see the dashboard. It was the interface for Stonehaven's asset management software. At the top in bright red letters, the words "Protocol Slate Active" were pulsing. "I have just initiated a total lockdown of the administrative privileges for the Ivory Crest regarding the Blackwell family," I announced Darius. "I need you to authorize the biometric override. From this moment on, no one overrides a charge, no one deletes a video file, and no one modifies a guest record without my thumbprint." Darius looked at Mara. She gave a sharp nod. "Do it, Darius. She owns the building." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He moved to the console on the wall and keyed in his authorization. The room's lighting dipped for a second as the system reset, locking out the local admin protocols. "Now," I said, pulling up the financial logs, "let us look at the damage." I projected the spreadsheet onto the smart glass wall. It was a sea of red ink. "For the last 6 months," I began, my voice clinical and cold, "Malcolm, Veronica, Tessa, and Gideon have been treating this hotel like their personal piggy bank. Let us look at the breakdown." I scrolled through the list. It was grotesque.
Suite 701.
The presidential Occupied for 42 nights by Gideon and Tessa. Rate card is $3,000 a night. Amount paid 0. Spa treatments. Continued. Highlighting another block. Weekly sessions for Veronica and 3 of her friends. Massages. Facials. Imported mud baths. Total cost over the last quarter. $28,000. Billed to marketing expenses. And the wine. Mara whispered, looking at the screen with horror. I knew they ordered bottles to the room, but I thought they were paying the family rate. There is no family rate that covers a $4,000 bottle of vintage Bordeaux being used to soak a spilled stain out of a carpet, I said, pointing to a damage report from 2 weeks ago. They are not just staying here for free. They are looting the inventory. I tried to bill them. The internal legal counsel spoke up. He was a young man. Nervous. Clutching a file folder. Last month, I sent an invoice to Mr. Blackwell for the catering he ordered for a private lunch. He told me to charge it to the legacy account. When I checked, that account does not exist. Gets worse, I said. I tapped a few keys, bringing up the access logs. This was the smoking gun I had found while scanning the system on the plane. The system is designed to automatically lock a guest out if their bill exceeds $5,000 without payment. It is a hard limit. But look here. I pointed to a series of command lines. Override authorization user ID 8892. Who is user 8892? Darius asked, leaning in. That was the former general manager, Mara said, her voice turning hard. The one I replaced. Mr. Henderson. Exactly, I said. Malcolm didn't just bully the staff. He had Henderson in his pocket. Every time the bill got too high, Henderson went into the back end and wiped the balance to 0, categorizing it as compensatory guest relations. They have been stealing services worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they had an accomplice on the inside covering their tracks. The room was silent. This was not just bad etiquette. This was corporate theft in the eyes of the law. What my family had done was indistinguishable from walking into the vault and stuffing cash into their pockets. Do we cut them off? Darius asked, his hand drifting to his belt. I can have my team go up to the suite right now. Lock the doors. Escort them out. No, I said instantly. They all looked at me. If you throw them out now, they play the victim, I explained. They will go to the press. They will scream that the big bad corporation is evicting the founders on their anniversary. They will hide the theft behind a wall of sentimentality. I do not want them evicted. I want them exposed. I swiped to the next tab on my screen. Besides, the theft of room service is petty cash compared to what they are planning tonight. I opened a file labeled Event Booking Grand Ballroom, the Blackwell Legacy Growth Gala. I read aloud. Scheduled for tonight, 7 o'clock to midnight. 300 guests. Hainetu worth individuals. Local politicians. Old money. They booked the ballroom 2 days ago, Mara said. Malcolm said it was a private celebration. He demanded the fee be waived. It is not a celebration, I said. It is a sales pitch. I opened the attachment that had been uploaded to the event server, a digital brochure intended for the projection screen. It was glossy, filled with stock photos of smiling families and renderings of glass towers overlooking a pristine ocean. The Azure Coast Project. A Blackwell investment opportunity. I scanned the text. Guaranteed returns of 20% per annum. I read. My tone dripping with skepticism. Secured by prime coastal real estate. There is no coastal real estate, I said. Looking up at the team, I ran a title search on the coordinates listed in the fine print during my flight. Do you know what is on that land? A swamp and a condemned warehouse owned by a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The legal counsel dropped his pen. That is securities fraud. If they solicit money from investors in this hotel on our property, then Stonehaven becomes liable as a facilitator if we do not stop it. I finished his sentence. They are not just mooching shrimp cocktails anymore. They are setting up a Ponzi scheme in our ballroom. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below me, the city of Port Briar was beginning to light up as the sun dipped below the horizon. I could see the cars pulling into the hotel driveway. Expensive sedans. Limousines. The victims were arriving. "Here is the plan," I said, turning back to the room. My voice was absolute. "We do not cancel the gala. We let them set the stage. We let them get up on that podium. We let them make their pitch." Joan. "That is risky," the lawyer said. "It is necessary," I countered. "I need them to commit the act. I need the intent to be undeniable. If we stop them now, they can claim it was just a draft, a misunderstanding. But once they ask for the check, that is a crime." I looked at Darius. "I want full surveillance. Every camera in the ballroom needs to be recording to a redundant drive that only I can access. I want audio clear enough to hear a whisper. Done." Darius said Mara. I turned to the GM. "Let the staff know that for tonight the Blackwells have whatever they want. If they want more champagne, give it to them. If they want to scream at a waiter, let them scream. Document everything. Every insult. Every broken glass. Every unauthorized demand. I want a paper trail so thick it could choke a horse in the system logs." Mara asked. "Lock them," I said. "Freeze the current state. Nobody deletes the history of the last 6 months. That is our leverage. That is the proof that this was not a one-time mistake, but a pattern of exploitation." I looked at the digital clock on the wall. The red numbers shifted silently. 5:30 p.m. "They have 6 hours," I said. 6 hours to drink, to boast, to lie to their friends, and to dig their own graves. I thought about the $500 lying on the lobby floor. I thought about the way my mother had looked at my coat, dismissing it as the uniform of a failure. They thought power was about shouting the loudest. They thought it was about banners and sequins. They were about to learn that true power is silent. True power is the ability to sit in a room 50 floors above the chaos, holding the kill switch and waiting for the perfect moment to press it. Go. I told them. Act normal. Be polite. Let them feel like kings and queens for one last night. The team filed out, leaving me alone in the darkening office. I walked back to the window. I could imagine them downstairs right now. Veronica yelling at a florist. Malcolm checking his tie in the mirror. Gideon practicing his smile. And Tessa checking her subscriber count. They were preparing for a party. I looked at my reflection in the glass. My face was calm. Unreadable. They are preparing a party. I whispered to the empty room. I am preparing a trial. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Emerald Lounge, the hotel's most exclusive breakfast venue. It was a space designed for hushed conversations and the soft clinking of silver against bone china. A sanctuary where the coffee was poured from silver pots, and the butter was shaped into delicate rosettes. I sat at a corner table, a cup of Earl Grey steaming gently in front of me, watching the room wake up. I had been there since 7 in the morning waiting. I knew the habits of the Blackwell family better than they knew themselves. They would not order room service today. They would want to be seen. 8:15. They made their entrance. They did not walk into a room so much as they invaded it. Malcolm led the phalanx, looking puffy-faced and red, likely the result of too much scotch the night before. He walked with a heavy stomping gait, assuming that any obstacle in his path, be it a chair or a person, would naturally move out of his way. Veronica followed, wearing a silk tan that was far too bright for the morning light. Her sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Tessa and Gideon trailed behind, both glued to their phones. checking the engagement metrics from their live stream the previous night. The atmosphere in the lounge shifted instantly. The quiet hum of polite society was broken by their volume. They pulled out chairs with screeching scrapes against the floor. They snapped their fingers for water before they had even fully sat down. It was a masterclass in new money arrogance. A desperate need to prove they owned the place by treating everyone else like furniture. I watched them from behind the rim of my teacup. I was invisible to them, obscured by a large fern and their own self-absorption. I wanted to see how they treated the people who could do nothing for them. That is the truest test of character. And the Blackwells were failing it with every breath. A server approached their table. I recognized her. Her name was Elena. A woman in her 60s who had worked at the Ivory Crest for 2 decades. She had a kind face and a bad hip that made her walk with a slight limp. But she was one of the most professional staff members in the building. She placed a basket of pastries on their table with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell," Elena said softly. "Happy anniversary." Veronica did not look up. She reached into the basket, picked up a croissant, inspected it, and then dropped it back as if it were contaminated. "Coffee," Veronica barked. "And do not bring me that sludge from the carf. I want a fresh press. Kenyan beans. If it is not boiling hot, I will send it back. For Mrs. Blackwell," Elena said, keeping her composure. 5 minutes later, Elena returned with the French press. She depressed the plunger slowly, poured the dark liquid into a cup, and placed it before my mother. Veronica lifted the cup, took a sip, and immediately spat it back into the cup with a loud, theatrical retching noise. The entire room went silent. A businessman at the next table lowered his newspaper. "Is this a joke?" Veronica hissed, slamming the cup down into the saucer. Brown liquid sloshed over the rim and stained the white tablecloth. "This is lukewarm dish water. Are you incompetent or are you just stupid? I am so sorry, Mom. Elena stammered, her hands trembling slightly. I brewed it fresh just now. I can. You can get out of my face." Veronica snapped. "Look at you. You are ancient. Why does this hotel hire geriatrics? You should be in a nursing home." Not spilling filth on my table. It was cruel. It was unnecessary. It was exactly what I needed the room to see. I set my teacup down. The porcelain made a sharp clack against the saucer. I stood up. I did not rush. I smoothed the front of my cream-colored silk blouse and walked across the room. My heels made no sound on the thick carpet. I stopped 3 feet from their table. "She is doing her job." "Veronica," I said. My voice was level, cutting through the tension. "Perhaps if you stopped screaming, the coffee would not taste so bitter." Veronica whipped her head around. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed into slits. The shock of seeing me in the VIP section, a place reserved for guests paying premium rates, overrode her anger at the coffee. "You," she spat. She stood up, her chair scraping backward again. "What are you doing here? I thought we told you to crawl back to the gutter." "I am having breakfast," I said, gesturing to my table in the corner. In the Emerald Lounge, Tessa piped up, looking up from her phone. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "This area is for paying guests, Nora. The cover charge for breakfast alone is $70. Did you rob a convenience store on your way over?" "Actually," Veronica interrupted, stepping around the table to close the distance between us. She loomed over me, smelling of expensive perfume and stale aggression. "She is here to beg. That is it. Isn't it? You followed us in here to make a scene so we would pay you to leave." She reached out and grabbed my upper arm. Her fingernails dug into my skin through the silk. "Get out," she hissed. "Get out of the paying guests area before I have security drag you out by your hair. Take your hand off me." I said. I did not shout. I did not pull away. I simply stated it as a fact. Or what? Veronica sneered. You will cry. She looked at the plate of food I had been carrying, a small plate of fruit and toast that I had picked up from the buffet on my way over. With a sudden violent motion, she swiped her hand upward. The plate flew from my grip. It hit the floor with a spectacular crash. The porcelain shattered into a dozen jagged pieces. Sliced melon and toast scattered across the pristine carpet. A strawberry rolled and came to a stop against the polished shoe of the businessman at the next table. The silence in the room was absolute. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of shock. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. The air felt sucked out of the room. In the world of the ultra-wealthy, a public display of physical aggression is the ultimate taboo. It smells of desperation. Veronica stood there breathing hard, looking triumphant. She thought she had put me in my place. She thought she had shown the room that I was trash to be discarded. She was wrong. She had just shown the room that she was unstable. I looked down at the mess on the floor. Then I looked at Elena, who was covering her mouth with her hand, looking terrified. I gave the older woman a reassuring nod before turning my gaze back to my mother. Pick it up, Veronica said, pointing at the floor. Clean up your mess and leave. I stepped forward. I did not bend down. I stepped carefully over a piece of cantaloupe, closing the distance until I was intimate enough to whisper, yet loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear every syllable. You are very stressed. Mother, I said. Is it because of the money? I have plenty of money, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Do you? I asked. I tilted my head slightly, because last night I was at the lobby bar. I saw the bartender try to run your platinum card for a round of drinks. It was declined. Malcolm, who had been watching the scene with a bored expression, suddenly shot up from his chair. His face went from red to ashen gray in a heartbeat. That is a lie, Malcolm shouted. But his voice lacked conviction. He looked around the room, seeing the eyes of potential investors and peers staring back at him. It was a security hold, a banking error. We travel so much. The bank freezes it for protection. Is that so? Continued, keeping my eyes locked on Veronica, because the error code was not for fraud protection. It was for insufficient funds. The bartender was quite discreet. But sound travels. Shut up, Tessa screamed. You are just jealous. You are making things up. But the damage was done. I saw the businessman at the next table exchange a look with his wife. He raised an eyebrow. The seed of doubt had been planted. In their world, solvency was everything. If the Blackwells could not pay a bar tab, how could they guarantee a 20% return on a coastal development project? Gideon had been quiet during the exchange. He was sitting closest to where I stood. As I turned to address Malcolm, my sleeve rode up slightly. Gideon's eyes dropped to my wrist. I was wearing a watch I rarely brought out of the safe. It was a vintage piece. A PC Philippe reference 1518 in rose gold. There were fewer than 60 of them in the world. To the uneducated eye, it was just an old watch. To someone like Gideon, who spent his nights scrolling through luxury watch forums and dreaming of status, it was a holy grail. It was worth more than the entire wedding reception they had thrown 3 years ago. He froze. His eyes widened, tracking the sweep of the second hand, the patina on the dial. He knew. He knew that a woman who could not afford a motel room does not wear a watch that costs as much as a house in the Hamptons. He stood up slowly. The sneer was gone from his face, replaced by a look of intense confusion and dawning horror. Let me see that, he said. He reached out, not aggressively like Veronica, but with a strange, desperate curiosity. He tried to grab my wrist. I pulled my hand back sharply. Do not touch me, I said. Is it real? Gideon whispered. He looked at my face. Really looked at me for the first time since I had arrived. He was searching for the sister-in-law. He thought he knew the failure, the charity case. But he was seeing something else. He was seeing the cut of my silk blouse, the quality of my shoes, the cold, hard intelligence in my eyes. Who are you? The question hung in the air. Who are you? Malcolm and Veronica were too busy doing damage control, smiling manically at the other diners and muttering about banking glitches to hear him. But Gideon heard himself. He realized that the narrative they had built that I was destitute did not align with the reality standing in front of him. I did not answer him. I did not need to. I bent down. But not to clean up the food. I reached out and picked up a single jagged shard of the white porcelain plate Veronica had smashed. It was sharp. Dangerously so. I held it between my thumb and forefinger. I placed the shard gently on their white linen tablecloth, right next to Malcolm's untouched coffee. It sat there like a blade, a stark contrast to the soft luxury of the breakfast setting. You dropped something, I said softly. I looked at Gideon one last time. His face was pale. The contempt that had been there yesterday was gone. In its place was fear. He was realizing that there was a predator in the room. And for the first time, he suspected it might not be his wife or his father-in-law. Enjoy the gala tonight, I said. I hear the ballroom is lovely this time of year. I turned and walked away. I did not look back at the mess on the floor. I did not look back at Elena, who was now being helped by a manager. I walked out of the Emerald Lounge with my head high, leaving the Blackwells sitting in the ruins of their own behavior. As I exited the heavy double doors, I paused to check my reflection in a decorative mirror. I looked calm, composed behind me. I could hear the hushed whispers of the dining room starting up again. They weren't talking about the weather anymore. They were talking about the Blackwells. They were talking about the declined card. They were talking about the screaming woman who threw a plate. Phase 1 was complete. I had stripped away their dignity. Tonight I would strip away everything else. The wind on the rooftop terrace of the Cobalt Key Tower was always stronger than people expected. It whipped off the ocean, cold and salt-laden, serving as a reminder that nature did not care about the thread count of your linens or the balance in your bank account. I stepped out of the service elevator and onto the slate tiles of the terrace. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun was high, bleaching the white tablecloths that were being set up for the evening cocktail hour preceding the gala. I was there to inspect the perimeter. As the owner, I knew that the rooftop had a single blind spot in the security grid, a small maintenance access point behind the HVAC units. I wanted to ensure Darius had covered it. I did not want my family slipping out the back door when the walls started closing in. But before I could reach the maintenance bay, a shrill voice cut through the sound of the wind. "Are you deaf?" I said. "Move it to the left." I froze. I knew that voice. It was the sound of my childhood trauma. The sound of Tessa when she was tired, hungry, or simply bored. I walked around a large planter filled with ornamental bamboo in the center of the VIP cabana area. Tessa was standing over a housekeeping cart. A woman was on her knees scrubbing a faint scuff mark on the floor. The housekeeper was not young. She had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and hands that looked like they had worked hard every day for 60 years. Her name tag read Sophia. Tessa was holding a glass of iced tea. As I watched, she deliberately tilted the glass, letting a stream of amber liquid pour onto the spot Sophia had just cleaned. "Oops," Tessa said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Missed the coaster. Clean that up, too. And do it faster this time. You are moving like a snail. God, why does this hotel hire people who are practically dead?" Sophia did not look up. She just dipped her rag back into the bucket, her shoulders hunched in resignation. She was used to this. She was used to people who thought their room key gave them the right to treat human beings like appliances. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Sophia murmured. "I will clean it right away." "You better," Tessa snapped. "And don't look at me with that attitude. I can have you fired before I finish this drink. Do you know who I am?" My father built this place. That was enough. I stepped out from behind the bamboo. Actually, he did not build it. The construction firm did. And the bank financed it. Malcolm just cut the ribbon. Tessa spun around. When she saw me, her face contorted into a mask of pure irritation. She looked tired. The live streaming, the late nights, and the underlying stress of the impending financial collapse were starting to show through her heavy foundation. "You again," she groaned. "Are you stalking me? Seriously? Get a life. Go haunt the basement or something." I ignored her. I walked past her and crouched down next to Sophia. I placed a hand gently on the woman's shoulder. She flinched, expecting another blow, but relaxed when she saw my face. "Stand up." "Sophia," I said softly. "I have to finish." "Mississippi," Sophia whispered, her eyes darting nervously to Tessa. "The lady is very upset." "The lady is irrelevant," I said. I stood up and offered Sophia my hand. She took it, her palm rough and calloused against mine. I pulled her to her feet. "Leave the cart. You are done for the day." "Excuse me." Tessa laughed. A high, incredulous sound. "She is not going anywhere until I say so. I want this floor spotless before my guests arrive for the pre-party." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen 3 times. "Sophia," I said, keeping my eyes on my sister. "I have just authorized 2 weeks of paid administrative leave for you. Go to the locker room, change your clothes, and go home to your family. You will receive a bonus in your next paycheck for dealing with a hostile work environment." Sophia looked at me stunned. "Are you sure?" "Go," I said kindly. Now Sophia nodded, gave a quick, confused bow, and hurried toward the service elevators, leaving the cleaning cart behind. Tessa watched her go, her mouth hanging open. Then the shock turned to fury. She took a step toward me, her hands balling into fists. "Who do you think you are?" she screamed. Guests at the far end of the terrace turned to look. A couple of event planners stopped arranging flowers to watch. "You do not work here. You are a nobody. You cannot just send the staff home because you want to play hero." I said calmly. "Because I am the one who pays her salary." It was the first time I had said it out loud to her face. "What?" Tessa scoffed. "You cannot even pay for a sandwich. You are delusional. Malcolm pays her salary. I pay her salary. You have not paid for anything in 6 months. Tessa," I said. "You are a squatter in a silk dress. And unlike Sophia, who works for her living, you are simply a liability. Shut up." Sophia stays. Continued, my voice hardening. However, your tenure is looking very uncertain." Tessa snapped. She did not think. She did not calculate. She simply reacted with the raw, spoiled instinct of a child who has never been told no. She lunged forward and swung her right hand with all her strength. The slap echoed across the rooftop, connected hard with my left cheek. My head snapped to the side. I felt the sting of her ring scratching my skin, and the hot metallic taste of blood filled my mouth where my tooth had cut into my lip. The terrace went deadly silent. The event planners gasped. A waiter dropped a tray of silverware, the crash sounding like a gunshot in the quiet. I did not stumble. I did not cry out. I slowly turned my head back to face her. My cheek was throbbing, burning with heat. I could feel a small trickle of blood running down my chin. Tessa stood there breathing heavy, her hand still raised. For a second, she looked satisfied. Then, as she saw the look in my eyes, the satisfaction drained away, replaced by a sudden, chilling realization that she had crossed a line she could not uncross. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a white handkerchief. I dabbed the corner of my mouth, checking the blood. It was bright red against the white cotton. "That was a mistake," I said. My voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more weight than her scream. I raised my phone. I did not call the police. I called the internal legal department. "This is Nora Jones," I said into the receiver. My eyes locked on Tessa's terrified face. "I am on the North Terrace. I have just been physically assaulted by a non-guest. Please open a file. Assault and battery workplace harassment, and instruct the finance department to add a $50,000 security surcharge to the Blackwell account for liability risk. Send the footage from camera 4 to my private server." "Wait," Tessa stammered, taking a step back. "Nora, stop. I didn't mean." I hung up the phone. $50,000. Tessa. That was an expensive temper tantrum. I turned and walked away. I needed to wash the blood off my face. I took the service stairs down one flight to avoid the guests. The concrete stairwell was cool and gray. I reached the landing for the 39th floor, intending to cut through the service corridor to the executive suite. The heavy metal door swung open before I could reach it. Malcolm blocked my path. He looked worse than he had at breakfast. His tie was loosened. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was sweating. He must have been waiting for me. He must have been tracking me on the old security feed, unaware that I was watching him watch me. "Where is it?" he demanded. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask about the red mark on my face. "Where is what?" Malcolm asked, leaning against the concrete wall. "The money," he hissed. He stepped closer, crowding me. "I know you have money. I saw the watch. Gideon told me you are playing some sick game, hiding your wealth while your family suffers." "Suffers?" I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "You are throwing $1 million party tonight. It is an investment," he shouted, his voice echoing in the narrow corridor. "But I need liquidity. The vendors, they are asking for cash deposits. The bank is being difficult. I need you to write me a check now. Call it a loan. Call it an apology for being a terrible daughter." "I am not giving you a dime," I said. He slammed his hand against the wall next to my head. "You ungrateful little brat, I made you. I can destroy you if you do not give me that money. I will have you arrested for trespassing. I will ruin your name. I will make sure you never work in this town again. My name is Nora Jones," I said, staring him down. "And the name Blackwell has no power over me anymore. I will break you," he snarled. He raised a hand as if to strike me, mirroring the violence his daughter had just displayed. "Do it," I challenged him. "There is a camera right above your head. Go ahead." "Malcolm, add witness intimidation to the list of charges." Tessa just gave me a lovely head start. He froze. He looked up at the camera, then back at me. His hand trembled, hovering in the air. "Malcolm." The voice came from the other end of the hallway. We both turned. Gideon was standing by the door. He looked pale. He was looking at Malcolm, his father-in-law, the man he had idolized and followed for 5 years. But he was not looking at him with admiration. He was looking at him with disgust. "Gideon," Malcolm said, lowering his hand quickly, trying to compose himself. "I was just explaining the situation to Nora." "I heard you," Gideon said. His voice was flat. "I heard you asking for money. You told me the gala was fully funded. You told me the accounts were overflowing. They are." Malcolm lied, forcing a smile. "It is just a temporary cash flow issue. Technicalities." Gideon looked at me. He saw the swelling on my cheek. He saw the blood I had wiped away. Then he looked back at Malcolm, the man who was violently cornering a woman in a service hallway. "We need to go," Gideon said. "Guests are arriving." "Yes," Malcolm said, straightening his jacket. "Yes. Of course." "Come?" Gideon. Let us leave her to rot. Malcolm brushed past me, hitting my shoulder with his own. He walked toward Gideon, expecting his son-in-law to fall in line. But Gideon did not move immediately. He stayed by the door, holding it open. He looked at me one last time. It was a look of calculation. He was realizing that the ship was sinking and he was handcuffed to the captain. Did she hurt you? Gideon asked quietly as Malcolm disappeared around the corner. Who? I asked. Tessa, he said. She tried. I replied. Gideon nodded slowly. He didn't apologize. He didn't offer to help. He just turned and followed Malcolm, the gap between them growing wider with every step. The perfect alliance was fracturing. The rats were beginning to smell the water rising. I stood alone in the hallway. I touched my cheek. Stung. But the pain was sharp and clarifying. It was real. It was evidence. Slapping me is easy, I whispered to the empty air. But slapping the law let us see which hurts more. I pushed off the wall and headed for the elevator. I had a gala to attend, and I had a feeling that by the end of the night, the red mark on my face would be the least of the Blackwell family's problems. The keycard felt heavy in my pocket, a rectangle of plastic that held the power to dismantle a family. I stood outside the double mahogany doors of the presidential suite on the 50th floor. The hallway was silent, lined with plush carpeting that swallowed sound, but I could feel the chaotic energy vibrating from the other side of the wood. I had changed my clothes. Gone was the expensive trench coat and the silk blouse. I was now wearing the standard black uniform of the event support staff, a garment I had requested Mara to pull from the laundry inventory. I pulled my hair back into a severe functional bun to the Blackwells. Staff members were not people. They were moving furniture, faceless algorithms designed to serve. I was betting on their narcissism. I was betting that they would be so absorbed in their own drama that they would not look closely enough to see the wolf wearing the wool. I knocked twice. Event services. Called out. Pitching my voice to be professional and devoid of personality. The door was yanked open by Tessa. She was in a silk robe, her hair half-curled, her face a map of stress and cosmetic urgency. She looked at me and for a split second I saw recognition flicker in her eyes. But then she looked at the uniform and the cognitive dissonance took over. She did not see Nora, the sister who owned the building. She saw a servant who had come to fix a problem. About time, she snapped, stepping back to let me in. The steamer is in the corner. My gala dress is wrinkled and if I have to walk onto that stage looking like a prune, I will have your job. I walked into the suite. It was a disaster zone. The room, which usually commanded a rate of $12,000 a night, looked like a frat house had collided with a high-end boutique. Room service trays with half-eaten burgers were piled on the coffee table. Empty champagne bottles littered the floor. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Jackets, shoes, scarves discarded in a frenzy of indecision. Well, Tessa barked, pointing to a garment bag hanging on the wardrobe door. Don't just stand there. Get to work. I moved to the steamer. I kept my head down. Yes. Ma'am, I murmured. Tessa lost interest in me immediately. She turned back to the mirror, aggressively applying lipstick. I cannot believe the stress I am under. She muttered to her reflection. Gideon is useless. Malcolm is a wreck. I have to carry this whole family on my back. I filled the steamer with water and waited for it to heat up. While the machine hissed, I scanned the room. My eyes landed on the desk near the window. It was covered in paperwork. But what caught my attention was a handbag sitting on the floor next to the chair. It was an Hermes Himalaya Birkin. Or at least it was pretending to be one. If it were real, it would be worth upwards of $200,000. I knew for a fact that my father's credit lines had been maxed out months ago. I knelt down, pretending to check the outlet for the steamer cord, and shifted my position until I was next to the bag. I reached out and touched the leather. It was good. But it was not Hermes. The grain was slightly too uniform. The stitching on the handle was a fraction of a millimeter off. I opened the flap. Inside, stuffed into the side pocket, was a crumpled receipt and a shipping manifesto. I slid the papers out, shielding my actions with my body. The receipt was not from a boutique in Paris or New York. It was from a high-quality replica vendor based in Guangzhou. The price listed was $800. Included was a printed exchange of text messages between Tessa and the seller. Make sure the logo stamp is deep. Tessa had written, "I need to fool people who actually own these." I pulled my phone from my pocket and snapped 3 rapid photos. The bag, the receipt, and the messages. This was petty. Yet, but in the court of public opinion, where Tessa lived, proving she was a fraud who bought knockoffs while screaming at staff was a nuclear weapon. "Are you done yet?" Tessa yelled from the bathroom. "Almost." Mami replied. I shoved the papers back into the bag and stood up, grabbing the nozzle of the steamer. I began to run the steam over the emerald green gown she planned to wear. Suddenly, the balcony door slid open. Gideon walked in from the terrace. The wind whipped his hair, but he didn't seem to notice. He was holding a satellite phone, a device used by people who did not want their location or conversation traced by standard cell towers. He looked frantic. He paced the length of the living room, completely ignoring me to him. "I was just part of the upholstery. I do not care what the fee is," Gideon said into the phone. His voice was tight, bordering on panic. "Just move it." Yet, the full amount. $2 million. I froze. The steam hissed softly, masking the sound of my breath. $2 million. That was the exact amount they had collected from the initial early bird investors for the Azure Coast project. "No. Listen to me," Gideon hissed, turning his back to me and looking out at the city. "The flight plan is filed for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We are going to the Caymans. Once the money is confirmed in the offshore account, I am gone." I slowly reached into my pocket and tapped the icon for the hotel's integrated smart room system. I had admin access. I remotely activated the high-fidelity microphone built into the smart television on the wall directly in front of Gideon. The audio feed began streaming directly to my cloud storage. "What about Malcolm?" Gideon paused, listening to the person on the other end. Then he laughed. Cold, cruel sound. "Screw Malcolm. He is the fall guy. He thinks this is a legitimate bridge loan. He has no idea I am draining the liquidity. Let the feds take him. He is too old to run anyway." My grip on the steamer handle tightened until my knuckles turned white. I had expected greed. I had expected incompetence. I had not expected Gideon to cannibalize his own family so ruthlessly. He was going to leave my father, his partner, to face prison while he vanished with the money and the liability. Gideon asked, "Do not worry about that. I have the fail-safe." He walked over to the desk right where I had been kneeling moments before. He picked up a thick blue folder. "I have the papers right here," Gideon said, tapping the folder. "The operating agreement for the shell company. It is signed, but not by me." Turn. A smirk playing on his lips. "It is signed by Nora Jones." I traced her signature from an old birthday card she sent Tessa years ago. As far as the SEC is concerned, she is the silent partner. She is the one authorizing the transfers. If anyone investigates, the paper trail leads straight to her doorstep. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. They were not just stealing from the hotel. They were setting me up. They were planning to frame me for grand larceny and securities fraud. Gideon intended to fly to the Caribbean with $2 million, while I spent the next 20 years in federal prison fighting a signature he had forged. "Yes," Gideon said. "It is perfect. She is the black sheep. Everyone knows we hate each other. It makes sense she would try to scam us. Okay. I will see you at the airstrip." He hung up and tossed the phone onto the sofa. He dropped the blue folder back onto the desk and headed for the bathroom. Tessa. Hurry up. We need to be downstairs in 20 minutes. As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut, I moved. I dropped the steamer nozzle and crossed the room in 3 strides. I opened the blue folder. There it was. A transfer authorization form for the funds, moving them from the Legacy Growth account to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. And at the bottom in black ink was my name. The signature was a decent forgery, shaky but passable to a casual observer. I pulled out my phone again. My hands were steady, fueled by a cold, burning rage. I photographed every page of the document. Then I photographed the satellite phone on the sofa. What are you doing? The voice came from behind me. I turned. Tessa was standing in the doorway of the bathroom. She was fully dressed now in the emerald gown. She looked at me, then at the folder in my hand, then at my face. The recognition was instant this time. You, she whispered. You are wearing a uniform. It suits me. Don't you think? I said, closing the folder and tossing it back onto the desk. Black is very slimming. You were spying on us. She screeched. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Give me that phone. What did you hear? I heard enough, I said, shaking her off. I heard that your husband is planning to leave the country tomorrow with $2 million. I heard that he is planning to leave your father to rot in a cell. And I heard that you are stupid enough to believe he is taking you with him. Tessa's face went pale. You are lying. Gideon loves me. Gideon loves money. I corrected. And right now you are just extra baggage. Tessa looked at the desk, then back at me. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of humiliation. She saw the steamer. She saw the clothes on the floor. She realized I had been there the whole time, watching her pretend to be a queen in a castle built on sand. She grabbed a pair of fabric shears from the side table, heavy silver scissors she had used to cut tags off her new clothes. You ruin everything, she screamed. She did not attack me. Instead, she turned to the chair where I had draped my own trench coat, the expensive, understated cashmere coat I had worn into the hotel. She grabbed the coat and jammed the scissors into the fabric. Is this what you want? She yelled, slashing through the sleeve. You want to be better than us? You think you are so classy? She ripped the scissors down the back of the coat, shredding the lining. She stabbed the collar. She was destroying the physical representation of my success, trying to cut away the reality that I was the one in control. Get out, she screamed, throwing the ruined coat at my feet. Get out before I call security and tell them you stole from us. I looked down at the shredded cashmere. It was a $5,000 coat. It was now a pile of rags. I looked up at her. I did not scream. I did not fight back. I smiled. It was a small, terrifying smile. You can cut the fabric, Tessa, I said softly. But you cannot cut the truth. I stepped over the coat. I did not pick it up. I left it there as a monument to her loss of control. Enjoy the gala, I said. Gideon is waiting for you. I walked out of the suite. The moment the heavy door clicked shut behind me, the facade dropped. I did not walk to the elevator. I ran. I made it to the stairwell and descended 2 flights to the executive lounge, which was empty. I sat down at a computer terminal and connected my phone. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Upload audio files.
Giai confession megapixel 3 Upolat image Forger 01.jpg Upolat image Fake receipt JPG.
I opened a secure email channel. I typed in the addresses of the Stonehaven Legal Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Division, and the personal email of the district attorney, who was an old law school friend of my partner. Subject: urgent. Evidence of wire fraud. embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit identity theft. Location: Ivory Crest Hotel. Perpetrators: Gideon Shaw, Malcolm Blackwell. I attached the files. I looked at the screen. The cursor blinked. One click. That was all it took to turn a family drama into a federal indictment. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about Gideon laughing about leaving my father to face prison. I thought about Tessa slashing my coat because she had no other power left. I pressed send. The progress bar filled up in green. Message sent. I leaned back in the chair and exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. The hunt was over. The trap was sprung. Now all that was left was to go downstairs and watch them walk into it. The conference room on the executive level was cold, air-conditioned to a temperature that kept minds sharp and emotions suppressed. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent, casting long golden shadows across Port Briar. But inside this room, the only light came from the harsh glare of overhead LEDs and the glow of 3 Hydafin monitors. I sat at the head of the mahogany table. To my right was Mara Keaton, looking pale but determined. To my left was Darius Cole, his radio sitting silently on the table next to a schematic of the ballroom. Across from me sat our chief accountant, a man named Arthur, who treated numbers with religious reverence, and our lead counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Elalina, who had flown in from New York on my private jet an hour ago. "Show me the total," I said. Arthur adjusted his glasses and tapped a key on his laptop. The central monitor on the wall flickered, and a spreadsheet appeared. It was dense, column after column of red figures. "It is staggering." Joan," Arthur said. His voice hushed. "I have gone back 3 years. But the aggression has escalated significantly in the last 6 months. Since January, the Blackwell family account, which I must clarify has no funding source attached to it, has accumulated charges totaling $482,000. I looked at the number. Nearly $500,000. "Break it down," I ordered. Arthur highlighted the rows. "The presidential suite is the bulk of it at rate card value. That is $300,000. Then we have the incidentals, food and beverage, $62,000. They have been ordering the most expensive wines on the menu, drinking half, and sending the rest back as Ked to get a replacement, but keeping the bottles. Spa services $45,000. Private drivers billed to the hotel transportation log $25,000 and the override codes I asked. That is the most damning part." Mara interjected. She slid a stack of printed logs across the table toward me. Every time the system flagged the account for non-payment, an administrative override was entered. The user ID belongs to my predecessor, Mr. Henderson. But the timestamps. Some of these were entered at 3 o'clock in the morning. Some were entered remotely. "Malcolm bullied him," I said, flipping through the pages. "He used the I founded this place card to force Henderson to give him the keys to the kingdom. He turned the hotel's revenue stream into his personal allowance." "It is embezzlement," Elena the lawyer said calmly. "Technically, it is theft of services and fraud. But since Malcolm is not an employee, it is closer to grand larceny. He is stealing from the corporation, and since Stonehaven owns the corporation, he is stealing from you. We have them on the theft," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But that is just the appetizer. I want the main course." "What about the gala?" Darius spoke up. "The ballroom is prepped. The AV team is setting up the projector now. Malcolm sent down his presentation file an hour ago. He was very specific that no one is allowed to open it." "I opened it," I said. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and plugged it into the console. The screen changed. It showed a slide deck titled "The Azure Coast, A Legacy of Wealth." "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is a work of fiction. I cross-referenced the claims in this pitch deck with the data I pulled from Gideon's phone and the public land registry. They are claiming they own 100 acres of prime beachfront property. In reality, they own an option to buy a swamp that expires in 48 hours. They are claiming they have secured zoning permits for a 30-story resort. The city planning office has no record of an application. And the financial projections? Arthur asked. Fabricated? I replied. They are promising a 20% annual return guaranteed. That is not just optimistic. It is mathematically impossible for a project that has not broken ground. It is a Ponzi scheme. They are using tonight's investments to pay off the debts they owe to the offshore shell companies Gideon set up. Elena leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. If they stand on that stage and ask for money based on these slides, they are committing securities fraud. It becomes a federal crime the moment they accept a check. Which is why we do not stop the party, I said. I looked at each of them. I needed them to understand the precision of what we were about to do. If we cancel the gala now, I explained. Malcolm spins a story. He tells the world that the jealous corporate owners shut him down. He plays the martyr. He claims the project was real and we killed it. Gideon slips away to the Caymans and Tessa cries on social media about how she was victimized. I paused, letting the silence hang in the room. But if we let them speak, continued, if we let them stand in front of 300 witnesses and lie, then we have them. They dig their own graves. We do not need to push them. We just need to let them jump. So, we wait. Darius asked. We wait. I confirmed. But we also prepare the landing. I tapped the keyboard again. A new file appeared on the screen. This is the presentation they will be giving, I said. The team looked at the screen. It was not the glossy Azure Coast pitch. It was a forensic timeline. It started with the mortgage default notices on the Blackwell estate. It moved to the fake Hermes receipts. It showed the system logs of the stolen hotel services. And finally, it ended with the audio file I had recorded in the sweet Gideon's voice, clear as a bell, talking about framing me and fleeing the country. I want the AV technician swapped out, I told Darius. Put one of your most trusted guys in the booth when Malcolm clicks the remote to start his slideshow. This is what plays. Not his lies. My truth. I will handle the booth myself, Darius said. A grim smile touching his lips. I would not miss this. And the exits? I asked. Per protocol, Darius said. Once the event starts, the side doors are magnetically locked for security purposes. The only way out is the main double doors at the back of the room. I will have a team stationed there. Gideon thinks he has a flight tomorrow. He won't even make it to the parking lot. Excellent. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from the front desk manager. Mr. Blackwell is demanding his VIP access be restored immediately. He says he cannot get into the executive lounge to toast with his early guests. He is threatening to fire everyone. I showed the message to Mara. She looked anxious. What do you want me to do if I say no? He might cause a scene before the gala starts. Give it to him, I said immediately. Mara looked surprised. Restore his access. Yet, I said. Unblock the cards. Open the lounge. Send up a bottle of that expensive champagne he likes. Let him feel powerful. Let him think his threats worked. The higher he thinks he's flying, the harder he hits the pavement when I cut the engine. Mar nodded, typing a command into her tablet. Done. Access restored until midnight. Good, I said. Now, the physical evidence. I reached into my bag and pulled out 3 items. A black leather folder, a wireless presentation clicker, and a silver USB drive. Malcolm is currently in the green room behind the stage, I said. He is rehearsing. He has his presentation folder on the table, and he is holding his own clicker. He is superstitious about them. He thinks they bring him luck. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I am going down there, I said. I am going to wish my father good luck, and while I am doing that I am going to switch these out. Is that safe? Elena asked. If he realizes he won't. I said he is too arrogant to look closely. He sees what he wants to see. He will see a black folder and a black clicker and he will assume they are his. He never pays attention to details. That is why he is bankrupt, and that is why he is going to lose everything tonight. I gathered the items. Elena, coordinate with the financial crimes liaison. Tell them to be ready to move at 8:45. That is when the pitch ends. Understood, Elena said. Arthur, keep the logs running. I want to capture every single cent they spend between now and the arrest. Every grape they eat. Every napkin they use. Add it to the restitution bill. With pleasure, Arthur said. I walked out of the conference room and headed for the service elevator. The hotel was buzzing now. Guests were arriving in droves, filling the lobby with the sound of laughter and the rustle of expensive fabrics. I moved through the back corridors, the veins of the building that the guests never saw. I reached the backstage area of the grand ballroom. It was dark and quiet, smelling of dust and plywood. Through the heavy curtains, I could hear the murmur of the catering staff setting the tables. I found the green room. The door was ajar. Malcolm was inside. He was alone. He was standing in front of a full-length mirror, practicing his smile. It was a practiced predatory grin, designed to disarm and deceive. On the small table next to him lay his folder and his clicker. He did not hear me enter. The carpet was thick, and his ego was loud. Dad, I said. He jumped, spinning around. When he saw me, his expression hardened, but there was a gleam of triumph in his eyes. He thought he had won because the VIP lounge was open. He thought I had capitulated. He sneered. Come to beg for forgiveness. It is too late. Nora, the gala is happening. The investors are here. I am back on top. I just came to give you this, I said. I held out the crumpled $500 bill, the one they had thrown at me, the one I had kept. I thought you might need it for a tip. He laughed. Keep it. You will need it for bus fare. He turned back to the mirror to adjust his tie. Get out of my sight. I have a legacy to build. While his back was turned, my hand moved. It was a simple sleight of hand, a trick I had learned not from magic school, but from years of boardroom negotiations where swapping a contract at the last second could save millions. I placed my black folder on top of his, slid his out from under it, and dropped his into my tote bag. I swapped the clicker on the table with the identical one in my palm. It took less than 2 seconds. Goodbye, Malcolm, I said. Go to hell, he replied to his reflection. I walked out of the green room, his original folder and clicker safely in my bag. I walked past the stage manager who nodded at me knowing exactly who I was. I stepped out from behind the curtain and stood on the edge of the ballroom floor. The room was magnificent. The chandeliers were dimmed to a romantic glow. The tables were set with crystal and silver. The centerpieces were towering arrangements of white orchids. It was a setting fit for royalty. At the front of the room, a massive projection screen waited, blank and white. I looked at the empty chairs, 300 of them. In an hour, they would be filled with people who trusted the name Blackwell. In 2 hours, those people would be witnesses to a public execution. I touched the pocket where I had hidden the real clicker, the one that controlled nothing. Malcolm would stand up there, press the button on the dummy remote I had given him, and wonder why the screen was showing his crimes instead of his dreams. They want a show, I whispered to the empty room. Fine. Tonight, I will give them a tragedy. I turned and walked toward the shadows at the back of the room, ready to take my place. The stage was set. The actors were in position. All we needed now was for the curtain to rise. The air in the grand ballroom was thick enough to choke on. A cocktail of expensive perfume, aged cognac, and the palpable desperation of new money trying to pass for old. 7 o'clock had arrived, and with it the vultures. 300 guests filled the cavernous space, a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns swirling under the crystal chandeliers. These were not friends in Port Briar. Friendship was a myth. There were only alliances and leverage. People spoke with smiles that stopped at their gums, their eyes constantly darting around the room to assess who was worth talking to and who was sinking. I stood in the shadow of a massive marble pillar near the bar, nursing a sparkling water. I had positioned myself strategically. From here, I had a clear line of sight to the stage, the main entrance, and the exit doors where Darius had stationed his team. I was the ghost at the feast, the anomaly in the equation that everyone could sense but no one could calculate. The double doors at the far end of the room swung open. The conversation in the room dipped in volume, then swelled again as the guests turned to watch the arrival of the hosts. Malcolm entered first. He walked with the swagger of a man who believes he has cheated gravity. He had freshened up since our encounter in the hallway. His tuxedo was midnight blue, his bow tie perfectly straight. In his right hand, he clutched the black leather folder. He held it tightly, pressing it against his side like a shield. He had no idea that he was carrying a packet of blank paper and a few sheets of hotel stationery I had stuffed inside during the switch. He thought he was holding the blueprint to his future. Behind him came Veronica. She was a vision of excess, dripping in diamonds that I knew were insured up to their eyes, but currently leveraged against 3 different loans. She waved to the crowd, a tight plastic smile plastered on her face. She moved through the room like a shark cutting through water, grabbing hands, kissing cheeks, and laughing a little too loudly. Then came Tessa and Gideon. Tessa was in her element, or at least the digital version of it. She held her phone up, the camera lens facing the crowd, narrating her entrance to her followers. She spun in a circle, capturing the scale of the room, pining for an audience of strangers while ignoring the very real danger closing in on her. But Gideon was different. He walked half a step behind his wife. His skin had a gray, clammy cast to it, visible even under the warm ambient lighting. He was not waving. He was scanning the room. His eyes were wide, frantic, jumping from face to face. He was looking for me. When his gaze finally landed on the pillar where I stood, he stopped dead. I stepped out of the shadows. I did not wave. I did not smile. I simply raised my glass in a mock salute. Gideon swallowed hard. He looked at Malcolm, who was already shaking hands with a senator near the buffet. He looked at the exit where 2 large men in dark suits, Darius's best officers, were standing with their arms crossed. Gideon realized in that moment that the cage was locked. I began to walk toward the center of the room. I moved slowly, letting the crowd part around me. The whispers started almost immediately. I was the Blackwell daughter who didn't exist, the one who had been erased from the narrative. My presence here, dressed in a gown that whispered quiet power rather than screaming for attention, was confusing them. "Is that Nora?" I heard a woman whisper behind her fan. I thought she was unwell. "She looks different," a man replied. "Look at the way she walks. That is not the walk of someone asking for a loan." I approached the circle where Malcolm was holding court. He was talking to Arthur Sterling, a venture capitalist with deep pockets and a reputation for ruthlessness. Sterling was the whale Malcolm needed to harpoon tonight. "Malcolm," Sterling said, his voice booming. "Quite a turnout. You must be proud." "Ideally. So, Arthur," Malcolm beamed, tapping the folder against his leg. "We have big things to discuss tonight. The Azure Coast project is going to redefine luxury on the eastern seaboard." "And who is this?" Sterling asked, looking past Malcolm's shoulder directly at me. Malcolm stiffened. He turned slowly, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he reassembled it. Ah, Malcolm said, his tone dismissive. This is Nora. My youngest. She's a bit of a free spirit. Doesn't really have a head for business. We let her come tonight to get a hot meal. It was a clumsy lie. Patronizing and cruel. Around us. A few sycophants chuckled nervously. Hello. Father, I said. My voice was calm, contrasting with the tension radiating from him. It is generous of you to feed the poor, though I believe the catering bill is currently unpaid. Malcolm's eyes bulged. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a hiss. One more word and I will have security drag you out by your hair in front of everyone. Do not test me. I am not testing you, Malcolm. I replied softly. I am grading you. Before he could respond, Gideon stepped into the circle. He looked like he was about to vomit, but he forced a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. He grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter and tapped a spoon against the glass. The sharp ding-ding-ding cut through the chatter. Everyone. Everyone. If I could have your attention for a moment, Gideon shouted. He sounded breathless. Manic. The room quieted. 300 faces turned toward us. The spotlight was on the family. Malcolm looked annoyed at the interruption, but Gideon ignored him. He needed to control the narrative. He needed to destroy my credibility before I could open my mouth. Welcome to the Legacy Gala, Gideon began, his hand shaking slightly as he held up the glass. We are so happy to see so many friends here. Tonight is about the future. It is about building something that lasts. He turned and pointed a finger at me. It was an accusatory gesture masked as a familial introduction. But before we talk business, Gideon continued, his voice taking on a sad, pitying tone, I want to address the elephant in the room. My sister-in-law Nora has joined us tonight. A murmur went through the crowd. We love Nora.
Gideon lied.
The words tasting like ash in his mouth. But as many of you know, she has struggled for years. Mental health is a serious issue. Paranoia. Delusions of grandeur. She has been confused lately. She sends strange emails. Makes up stories about the family. It breaks our hearts. I watched him. It was a bold move. He was gaslighting an entire ballroom. He was planting the seed that any evidence I produced, any accusation I made, was just the rambling of a crazy woman. So Gideon finished, sweating profusely now. If she says anything strange to you tonight, please treat her with kindness. She doesn't mean it. She is just unwell to family, to patients. Oh, to family. Malcolm echoed loudly, raising his glass. Happy to have the awkwardness explained away. To family. Veronica chirped, looking at me with triumphant malice. The crowd murmured, to family, and raised their glasses, drinking the Kool-Aid along with the champagne. They looked at me with pity. Poor Nora, the crazy sister. Tessa, standing next to Gideon, pointed her phone directly at my face. She was broadcasting this humiliation live. Did you hear that, guys? She said to her stream. Gideon is a saint. Dealing with her is so hard. But we are a loving family. She lowered the phone slightly and smirked at me. Did you take your meds today, Nora? Or are you going to throw another plate? The circle of wealthy elites waited for my reaction. They expected tears. They expected a scream. They expected the crazy woman Gideon had promised them. I did not move. I did not blink. I looked at Gideon, holding his gaze until he was forced to look away. That was a very moving speech. Gideon, I said. My voice was not amplified, but in the silence of the room, it carried. I took a step closer to him. But you made one mistake, I said. And what is that? Gideon asked, his voice cracking. You just introduced yourself as a liar to 500 people, I said. Gideon laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. Delusional. I told you. Am I? I asked. You said I have no head for business. You said I am destitute. Yet, oddly enough, I seem to recall you signing a document this afternoon that names me as your silent partner. A document you plan to use to send me to prison. Gideon froze. The glass in his hand tilted, spilling champagne onto his expensive shoe. She is talking nonsense, Malcolm interrupted, stepping between us. Ignore her. She is off her rocker. Is she? I turned to Malcolm. Check your pocket. Malcolm. The left one. Malcolm frowned. What? Check it. Commanded. Confused. Malcolm reached into his tuxedo jacket pocket. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was the $500 bill. The one Gideon had thrown on the floor. The one I had stepped on. Malcolm stared at it. He looked at me. Then at the bill. Then back at me. He didn't understand how it had gotten there. He didn't understand the sleight of hand, but he understood the message. I had been close enough to touch him, close enough to take things, close enough to swap things, and he hadn't even noticed. You threw this at me to make me go away, I said, addressing the group, but looking mainly at Veronica. You thought $500 was the price of my dignity. I reached out and plucked the bill from Malcolm's stunned fingers. I folded it neatly, crisp and sharp. I opened my clutch. A simple black leather clutch that looked plain, but was crafted by the same atelier that made briefcases for heads of state. I tucked the money inside. I will give this back, I said calmly. At the appropriate time. Consider it a down payment on your education. You are ruining the mood, Veronica hissed, stepping forward. Her face contorted. Get out. Why are you still here? You are embarrassing us. No. Mother, I said. I am waiting for the show. I turned my back on them. It was the ultimate insult. I walked away from the circle, leaving them standing there with their half-drunk champagne and their crumbling composure. I walked to a small empty high-top table near the AV booth. I placed my clutch on the table. I looked at the stage. The screen was still white. The projector was humming. I looked at my phone. It was 8:45. The pitch was scheduled to start in 5 minutes. Malcolm was composing himself, taking deep breaths, clutching the folder I had swapped. He was about to walk up those stairs. He was about to try and sell a swamp to sharks. Gideon was whispering frantically to Tessa. Veronica was chugging her drink. They were terrified. But they were trapped by their own greed. They couldn't leave. They had to finish the play. I unlocked my phone. I opened the messaging app. I selected the contact labeled Mara Catan. I typed a single word. Now I hit send. The message bubble turned blue. Almost immediately, the lights in the ballroom began to dim. The music faded out. A spotlight hit the podium on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. Please take your seats. The presentation is about to begin. I watched Malcolm adjust his jacket. He walked toward the stairs. He looked confident again. He had convinced himself that I was just a nuisance, a fly to be swatted away. He had no idea he was walking toward a guillotine. Go ahead. Dad, I whispered, taking a sip of my water. Break a leg. The room went dark. The only light came from the stage and the exit signs. The trap was set. The bait was taken. And I was the only one in the room who knew that when the lights came back on, the world as the Blackwells knew it would be gone forever. The spotlight hit Malcolm Blackwell, turning his midnight blue tuxedo into a beacon of assumed authority. He stood behind the acrylic podium, gripping the sides with white-knuckled intensity. The room hushed. 300 wealthy investors, city officials, and social climbers leaned forward, waiting to be sold a dream. I stood in the darkness at the back of the room, my hand resting on the cool surface of a high-top table. My heart was not racing. My breathing was steady. I watched my father open the black leather folder I had swapped in the green room. He looked down, expecting to see his speech notes, his bullet points, his psychological triggers. He saw blank pages. I saw his shoulders stiffen. He blinked rapidly. He flipped a page. Then another. Nothing. Just crisp white empty hotel stationery. He looked up, his eyes darting to the front row where Veronica sat, beaming like a pageant mom. He couldn't stop now. He had to wing it. He was a salesman after all. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified by the microphone system. "Ladies and gentlemen," Malcolm boomed, his voice shaking only slightly. "Thank you for joining us on this historic night. We are here to talk about legacy, about the future, about the Azure Coast." He raised his right hand, aiming the presentation clicker, the dummy clicker, at the massive screen behind him. "Behold," he said dramatically. "The vision." He pressed the button. Nothing happened on the screen. The white canvas remained blank. Malcolm frowned. He pressed it again. Harder. Click. Click. "Technical difficulties." He chuckled nervously. "Technology. Right. Always fails you when you need it." "Allow me." I whispered into the darkness. I signaled Darius in the booth. The screen behind Malcolm did not dissolve into a beautiful rendering of a seaside resort. Instead, it flashed black. Then read. A massive high-contrast document appeared. It was not a blueprint. It was a notice of default from the federal bank dated 3 weeks ago. The text was 10 foot tall. "Foreclosure imminent. Outstanding balance. $4 million. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It sounded like the air being sucked out of an airlock. Malcolm spun around. He saw the document. His jaw dropped. He pointed the clicker at the screen and mashed the button frantically, trying to make it go away. "Thup," he shouted at the booth. "Turn it off. Wrong file. This is the wrong file." The slide changed. It was not the resort. It was a chaotic collage of text messages, the ones I had photographed from Tessa's phone regarding the fake handbag overlaid with a shipping manifest for replica goods. Then it changed again. A spreadsheet. The Blackwell family account log. The crowd began to murmur. The whispers turned into a roar. "Foreclosure." Someone asked loud enough to be heard. "Is this a joke?" Malcolm was slamming the clicker against the podium. "Now, cut the feed. Ardian, do something." Gideon was paralyzed at his table, his face the color of old ash. He knew. He knew exactly what was happening. I stepped away from the shadows. "The remote does not work." "Malcolm," I said. My voice was not shouting, but I had keyed the microphone on the stage manager's headset that I had borrowed earlier to feed into the main PA system. My voice filled the room. Godlike. Coming from everywhere and nowhere. Heads snapped toward me. I walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted instantly, creating a wide corridor. I walked with a steady rhythmic pace, my heels clicking on the parquet floor. "Who is doing this?" Malcolm screamed into his podium mic. "Security, arrest her. She hacked the system." "I did not hack anything," I said, continuing my walk. "I am simply accessing my own files." I reached the stairs to the stage. I walked up them, ascending to the platform where my father stood. He looked small. Suddenly, the spotlight seemed to shrink him. "Get off my stage," he hissed, backing away from the podium. "It is not your stage," I said. I stood next to him, effectively sharing the spotlight. I looked out at the sea of confused, angry faces. "My name is Nora Jones," I announced. "Most of you know me as the failure of the Blackwell family, The one who was told to leave this hotel earlier today because I didn't fit the brand. I looked at Veronica in the front row. She was clutching her pearls, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. What you do not know, continued, is that the brand is bankrupt. The Ivory Crest Hotel is not owned by Malcolm Blackwell. The building, the land, and the operating license were acquired 6 months ago by the Stonehaven Equity Group. I paused for effect. I am the senior partner at Stonehaven, I said. I am the owner of this hotel. I am the one who signs the paychecks. And I am the one who has been watching this family steal from me for 180 days. Liar. Tessa screamed from the floor. She stood up, knocking her chair over. She is lying. She is broke. Darius, I said into the air. The logs. Please. The screen behind me shifted. The spreadsheet expanded. Room 701. I read aloud, pointing to the screen. Occupied by Tessa and Gideon Shaw. Total unpaid bill, $112,000. Spa services for Veronica Blackwell, $28,000. Unauthorized withdrawals from the petty cash fund, $15,000. The numbers scrolled by. A waterfall of greed. The room was silent now. The investors were doing the math. They did not just stay here, I said, my voice hardening. They used an administrative override code belonging to a fired manager to erase their debts. That is not hospitality, ladies and gentlemen. That is embezzlement. Malcolm lunged for the microphone. She forged it. It is a setup. We have millions in the Azure Coast project. We are liquid. The Azure Coast project? I repeated. Let us talk about that. I nodded to the booth. The screen went black. Then a single audio waveform appeared. A jagged green line on a black background. This afternoon, I said. I had a conversation with a steamer in the presidential suite, but the suite had another guest. I pressed play on my phone, which was synced to the system. Gideon's voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, crisp and high fidelity. There was no mistaking it. Screw Malcolm. He is the fall guy. He thinks this is a legitimate bridge loan. He has no idea I am draining the liquidity. The crowd gasped. Malcolm froze. He looked at the speaker. Then he slowly turned his head to look at Gideon. The betrayal on his face was total. It was the look of a man who realizes the knife in his back has his own name on the handle. The recording continued. I have the papers right here. It is signed by Nora Jones. I traced her signature. As far as the SEC is concerned, she is the silent partner. She is the one authorizing the transfers. The audio cut off. The silence that followed was heavy, dangerous. It was the silence of a lynch mob deciding who to hang first. Gideon stood up. He looked at the door. He looked at the window. He looked like a rat in a bucket. It is AI, Gideon shouted, his voice cracking into a squeak. It is a deep fake. She made it up. I have the metadata. Gideon, I said from the stage. And I have the satellite phone you used to make the call. And the folder with the forged signature is currently in the hands of the district attorney. Gideon didn't wait. He bolted. He kicked his chair aside and sprinted toward the side exit, the emergency door that Darius had secured. He hit the push bar with his full weight, expecting it to fly open. It didn't budge. He bounced off the door, stumbling back. He turned to run toward the main entrance, but two uniformed officers stepped into the doorway, their arms folded across their chests. Please return to your seat, Mr. Shaw. Darius's voice came over the PA. The party is not over. Malcolm was shaking. He looked at me. His eyes filled with tears of rage and humiliation. He realized that the investment he had been chasing was a trap, and his partner was a thief. But instead of blaming Gideon, he turned on me. You did this. Malcolm screamed, pointing a trembling finger at my face. You ruined us. You vindictive little witch. You planned this. You wanted to humiliate your own flesh and blood. I did not plan your greed. Malcolm, I replied coldly. I did not force you to steal. I did not tell Gideon to frame me. I simply turned on the lights. I am your father. He roared. I gave you life. And then you tried to take my life away. I countered. You tried to send me to prison to cover your own incompetence. I reached into my clutch. I pulled out the crisp folded $500 bill. I held it up. The stage lighting caught the watermark. Do you recognize this? I asked. Malcolm stared at it. Yesterday, I said. Addressing the room. My family threw this money at me in the lobby. They told me it was enough to buy a motel room. They told me to get out of their luxury hotel. I took a step toward him. He flinched. You used this money to buy my absence, I said. You used it to show me how little I was worth to you. You thought money was the only language I understood. I smoothed the bill out. Well, I'm speaking your language now, I said. This is not just $500. Malcolm, this is evidence. This is the proof of your intent. You wanted me gone so you could use my name to commit a felony. Nora, please. Veronica sobbed from the front row. She was standing up now, reaching out a hand toward the stage. We can talk about this. We are family. Don't do this in front of everyone. You did not want to talk when I was standing in the lobby with my suitcase. I said to her. You wanted an audience then. You wanted to live stream my shame. I gestured to the silent crowd. You have your audience. Mother, I said. Why aren't you smiling? I turned back to Malcolm. I am not doing this for revenge, I said. My voice dropping to a deadly whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. If I wanted revenge, I would have just evicted you. This is not revenge. This is a cleanup operation. I am scrubbing the stain off my property. I looked at the screen one last time. The image of the forged signature was still there, looming over them. The gala is over, I announced. But the legal proceedings are just beginning. I looked at Darius in the back of the room and nodded. Open the doors, I commanded. The main doors swung open, but it was not the valet staff waiting outside. It was a phalanx of men and women in windbreakers stamped with yellow letters. FBI. The crowd parted instantly, creating a wide berth. The agents marched in, their boots heavy on the floor. The sound was like a drumbeat of doom for the Blackwell dynasty. Malcolm slumped against the podium. Gideon was cowering by the buffet table. Tessa was sitting on the floor, weeping into her hands, her phone lying forgotten next to her. I placed the $500 bill on the podium right next to Malcolm's hand. Keep the change, I said. I walked down the stairs, moving away from the wreck, away from the family that had tried to bury me, and toward the exit. I did not look back. I did not need to. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the only applause I needed. The chaos in the ballroom was not loud. It was a suffocating, vibrating panic that seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the air. The giant screen behind me was still projecting the forensic timeline of the Blackwell family's crimes, casting a cold blue light over the 300 guests, who were now frozen in varying states of shock and morbid curiosity. Gideon Shaw was the first to break the paralysis. He did not look at his wife, who was sobbing on the floor. He did not look at his father-in-law, who was gripping the podium like a man on a sinking ship. Gideon looked only at the exit sign glowing red in the distance. He scrambled away from the buffet table, knocking over a tray of crystal flutes. The sound of shattering glass was sharp and violent. He sprinted toward the service door on the east wall, the one used by waiters to bring in trays of hot food. He assumed it would be unlocked. He assumed he could slip into the kitchen, navigate the labyrinth of the back of the house and disappear into the night before the net closed. He hit the door at full speed, his shoulder colliding with the wood. It did not budge. "Open it," Gideon screamed, hammering his fists against the metal push bar. "Open this door. Mr. Shaw." A deep voice rumbled from the shadows. Darius Cole stepped out from the alcove. He was not moving with urgency. He moved with the terrifying calmness of a predator who has already secured the kill. He stood between Gideon and the only other exit. "That door is magnetically sealed," Darius said. His hands clasped behind his back. "As is the freight elevator. As is the loading dock. Protocol Slate initiated a full perimeter lockdown 4 minutes ago. The building is effectively a vault." Gideon spun around, his back to the door, his chest heaving. He looked wild, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. "Let me out. I am a guest here. You cannot hold me." "I am not holding you," Darius replied, checking his watch. "I am simply preserving the crime scene." At the center of the room, the crowd began to shift. It was a subtle movement at first, like a tide pulling away from the shore. The investors, the politicians, the socialites, they were all backing away from the Blackwells, creating a wide, empty circle around the family. No one wanted to be standing close enough to be considered an accomplice. Then the second trap sprang. A man in a gray suit, who had been sipping a martini near the front row and nodding along to Malcolm's pitch earlier, stepped forward. I recognized him. He was listed on the guest list as a consultant for a mid-sized hedge fund. He reached into his jacket pocket. He did not pull out a business card. He pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. The gold badge inside caught the stage lights. Federal Treasury. Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The agent announced. His voice was projected clearly without a microphone. "Everyone, please remain where you are. I am freezing all data devices in this room. If you attempt to delete any emails, texts, or files from your phones, you will be charged with obstruction of justice." A woman near the back dropped her phone into her purse as if it were burning hot. "We have had eyes on the Azure Coast transactions for 3 months," the agent continued, walking toward the stage. "We just needed the solicitation to be made public to close the loop. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell, for being so clear about your intentions." Malcolm looked at the agent, then at me. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax effigy of himself. He let go of the podium and stumbled down the stairs, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He walked toward me, ignoring the agent, ignoring the crowd. He stopped 2 feet away. He smelled of fear, a sour metallic scent that cut through his expensive cologne. "Nora," he whispered. His voice was trembling. "Nora, listen to me." "I am listening." "Malcolm," I said, "I have been listening to you for 34 years. He licked his dry lips. "We can fix this. You and me. Stonehaven. It is a big company, right? You have resources. You can make this go away. We can say it was a misunderstanding, a bad audit." I stared at him, marveling at the depth of his delusion. "You want me to obstruct a federal investigation? I want you to save your family." He hissed, leaning in closer. "How much?" "That is what this is about, isn't it? You want to cut?" "Fine. I will give you 10% of the Azure Coast equity. 20%. Just tell them it was a simulation. Tell them it was a stress test for the investors. You are offering me equity in a swamp, Malcolm," I said. "I do not want your money. I have my own, and I certainly do not want your money when it is stolen. 50%. He pleaded, his voice rising to a desperate squeak. "I will give you half. Just stop them." I shook my head slowly. "You still do not understand. I am not negotiating a deal. I am witnessing a confession. I pulled my phone from my clutch and tapped the screen. The image on the giant projector changed again. It was no longer the audio file of Gideon. It was an email chain. You think Gideon was the only one planning to frame me? I asked softly. Malcolm froze. Look at the screen. Dad, I said. The email was dated 2 days prior. It was from Gideon to Malcolm. Subject, the Fall Guy body. The paperwork is ready. We will attribute the transfers to Nora's old trust account. If the SEC comes knocking, we claim she was managing the fund as a silent partner. She has the mode of resentment. Sticks. And there, right below Gideon's text, was Malcolm's reply. Do it. Just make sure my name is nowhere near the authorization. She has always been a burden. Let her be useful for once. The crowd read the text. A collective murmur of disgust rippled through the ballroom. Even the most hardened sharks in the room, men and women who would sell their own grandmothers for a profit, looked repulsed. Betrayal is business. But selling out your own child to save your skin is a sin that even Wall Street finds distasteful. Inu, I said. You didn't just let Gideon do it. You signed off on it. You were going to let me go to prison for 20 years so you could keep playing the big man in the big hotel. Malcolm opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the email. Undeniable and towering over him. He slumped. The fight leaving his body like air from a punctured balloon. He stammered. I had to protect the legacy. You are the legacy, I said. A legacy of fraud on the floor near the spilled champagne. Tessa was staring at the screen. She had stopped crying. She was looking at the email, then at Gideon, who was still arguing with Darius by the door. She stood up. Her emerald dress was stained with wine. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. She walked over to Gideon. She moved like a sleepwalker. You said. Tessa's voice was hollow. You said we were partners. You said it was us against the world. Gideon spun around annoyed. Not now. Tessa, can't you see I am trying to think? You called me extra baggage. She whispered. In the recording, you said I was baggage. I was stressed. Gideon snapped. I didn't mean it. Look, just shut up and let me handle this. If we stick to the story that Nora is crazy, we might. No. Tessa said. It was the first time in her life I had heard her say that word to him. What? Gideon scowled. You used me, she said. Her voice gaining strength. You made me buy those fake bags so you could save money for the offshore account. You made me sign papers I didn't read. You treated me like a prop so you could look like a family man to the investors. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of horror and realization. She saw me not as the enemy, but as the only person in the room who had actually told her the truth. He was going to leave me, wasn't he? Tessa asked me. Yes, I answered honestly. His flight is booked for one person. Seat 4. One way to Grand Cayman. Tessa let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She looked down at her wedding ring, a massive diamond that I now suspected was as fake as the handbag. She wrenched it off her finger. You bastard! She screamed, throwing the ring at Gideon's face. It bounced off his forehead, leaving a red mark. You are hysterical, Gideon yelled back. Control yourself. I am done controlling myself, Tessa shrieked. She turned to the federal agent who was approaching the stage. I want to talk. I want to tell you everything. He has a safe in the bedroom behind the painting. He keeps the ledger there. Tessa. Shut up. Gideon roared, lunging toward her. Darius moved faster. He stepped in, grabbing Gideon by the back of his tuxedo jacket and jerking him backward. Gideon flailed. But against Darius, he was a child fighting a statue. Tessa, Veronica screamed from the front row. Do not say a word. You are betraying the family. Veronica ran toward me. She had lost her shoes somewhere in the chaos. She looked wild, her hair coming loose from its pins. She tried to grab my arm. Her face twisted into a mask of frantic maternal aggression. "Stop this!" Veronica yelled. "Tell them to stop. You are my daughter. You owe me. I carried you. I raised you." I stepped back out of her reach. The crowd watched her with cold, judging eyes. They saw a woman who had spent decades bullying her child now trying to cash in a maternal bond she had bankrupted years ago. "You raised me to be a scapegoat," I said. "And you did a very good job because I learned how to survive you. I am your mother," she screeched, looking around the room for support, but finding none. "Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means you should have known better than to underestimate me," I replied. I looked at Tessa, who was standing trembling near the agent. "Tessa," I said clearly, "you have a choice right now. The door is closing." She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. "You can stand there and scream and go down as a co-conspirator," I said. "Or you can walk over to that agent, hand over your phone, unlock it, and give them everything. The texts, the emails, the location of the safe. If you do that," Malcolm shouted, "you are dead to this family." Tessa looked at Malcolm. Then she looked at the empty space where Gideon used to stand before Darius restrained him. Then she looked at me. "There is no family," Tessa whispered. "There is just a corporation and it just went bust." She walked over to the agent and handed him her phone. "The passcode is 112244. The safe combination is on the Notes app." "No," Gideon howled, struggling against Darius's grip. "She is lying. She is crazy. Too. They are all crazy. I was set up. This is a trap." He looked wildly at me. "You set me up. You planted that recording." "I did not plant anything, Gideon," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. "I simply pressed record. You are the one who opened your mouth. You are the one who bragged about your plan. You are the one who was so arrogant you thought the help was deaf. I will sue you." Gideon spat. "I will sue this entire hotel. You can try," I said. "But you will be doing it from a federal holding cell. And I have very good lawyers." Suddenly, a crackle of static broke through the room. It came from the radio clipped to Darius's belt. "Perimeter breach secure. Alpha team is in position. Moving to secure the ballroom. Ite 10 seconds." The room fell silent. The reality of what was happening settled in. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This wasn't a civil lawsuit. This was the end of the line. Gideon stopped struggling. He slumped in Darius's grip, his eyes going dead. Malcolm grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Watching the main doors, Veronica covered her mouth with her hands, a whimper escaping her throat. "They are here," I said. I looked at my watch. It was exactly 9 o'clock. Right on time. The double doors at the back of the ballroom did not swing open this time. They were thrown open with force. Heavy boots struck the hardwood floor. Thud, thud, thud. 12 agents and FBI windbreakers marched into the room. They moved with military precision, flanking the room, securing the exits, moving toward the stage. They were not there for champagne. They were there for the people who had turned my hotel into a crime scene. I stood on the stage, watching them come. I felt no joy. I felt no sadness. I felt only the cold, hard satisfaction of a balance sheet finally being corrected. The debt was being called in, and the Blackwells were about to pay with the only currency they had left, their freedom. The sound of heavy boots on the parquet floor was the only music left in the room. The orchestra had stopped playing. The chatter of the guests had died into a suffocating silence. The air in the grand ballroom, which had smelled of expensive perfume and roasted duck only minutes ago, now smelled of cold, bureaucratic steel. I stood on the edge of the stage, watching the dismantling of a dynasty. It was not violent. It was surgical. The federal agents moved with a practiced efficiency, splitting into teams to secure their targets. There was no room for negotiation, no space for the charm offensive that Malcolm had used to navigate his entire life. The law does not care about your dinner jacket or the vintage of the wine you are serving. Two agents stepped in front of Malcolm. He tried to draw himself up to his full height to summon the ghost of the tycoon he pretended to be. But his knees were shaking so badly that the movement looked like a spasm. "Malcolm Blackwell," the lead agent said, his voice flat and loud enough for the front row to hear. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and falsification of corporate records. This is a mistake," Malcolm stammered, his eyes darting around the room, looking for a friendly face, looking for anyone who would step in and stop the nightmare. But the investors who had been drinking his champagne 10 minutes ago were now looking at the ceiling, or the floor, or their phones. They were distancing themselves from the blast radius. "I demand to speak to my attorney." "You cannot do this here. This is a private event. You have the right to remain silent," the agent continued, pulling a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. The ratchet sound as they clicked onto Malcolm's wrists was sharp. A final period at the end of a very long, very loud sentence. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." To his left, Veronica was backing away, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender that looked more like a theatrical performance. "I didn't sign anything," she shrieked as a female agent approached her. "I am just the wife. I don't know anything about the business. Malcolm handles everything. We have your signature on the tax returns for the shell company, Mrs. Blackwell," the agent said calmly. "And we have video evidence of you utilizing funds from the fraudulent accounts for personal purchases. You are under arrest for conspiracy and tax evasion." "No," Veronica wailed. It was a high, thin sound. "My dress. You are hurting my arms." But the agents were not hurting her. They were simply guiding her hands behind her back. The diamonds on her wrists, bought with stolen money, clicked against the steel of the cuffs. The scene with Gideon was different. Darius had already separated him from the herd, pinning him near the service exit. Gideon was not trying to leverage his status. He was in a state of primal panic. He knew the specific weight of what he had done. Malcolm was a fraud, but Gideon was a thief who had planned to vanish. "Get him away from me," Gideon yelled as two agents took custody of him from Darius. "I want a deal. I will testify. I will give you the offshore accounts. Just don't put me in with him." He nodded frantically toward Malcolm. "I am not going down for him," Gideon screamed. He knew. He signed off on the scapegoat plan. "I have the emails. We have everything." "Mr. Shaw," the agent said, tightening the cuffs on Gideon's wrists, "you will have plenty of time to tell your story. But right now you are going to the federal holding facility." Gideon slumped, his legs giving out. The agents had to hold him up by his armpits. He looked at the door, then back at the ballroom, realizing that the flight to the Cayman Islands was never going to happen. Seat 4A would fly empty tomorrow. I walked down the stairs from the stage. The crowd parted for me instantly, creating a wide berth, as if I were radioactive. But it was not fear in their eyes anymore. It was awe. They had watched a demolition, and I was the one holding the detonator. I walked straight to where Malcolm stood. He was flanked by two agents. His head bowed. When he saw my shoes enter his field of vision, he looked up. His face was gray. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified look of an old man who realizes he is going to die in a cage. "Nora," he croaked. I stopped. I did not step too close. I maintained the distance of a stranger. "Nora." "Please," he whispered. Tears were leaking out of his eyes, cutting tracks through the powder on his face. "I am your father. Blood is thicker than water. You cannot let them take me like this. Not in front of them. He jerked his head toward the silent crowd. I said softly. And I am. We are family. He pleaded. We can work this out. I will sign the hotel over to you. I will give you everything. Just tell them to stop. Tell them it was a mistake. I already own the hotel. Malcolm. I reminded him. And as for family, you severed that tie a long time ago. You cut it every time you looked at me with disappointment. You cut it when you chose a thief over your own daughter because he wore a suit and told you what you wanted to hear. I did it for us. He sobbed. To keep the name alive. You killed the name. I said. Now I am just burying the body. Nora. Veronica screamed from a few feet away. She was fighting against the agent holding her arm. How can you be so cold? I am your mother. I gave birth to you. You are going to send your own mother to prison. I turned to look at her. She looked tragic.
Hair makeup smeared.
Her expensive gown twisted. But I felt nothing. The emotional well had run dry yesterday. I am not sending you to prison. Veronica. I said. The law is sending you to prison. I am just the witness. You are a monster. She spat. You are ungrateful trash. You have no heart. I had a heart. I said. My voice steady. But you broke it. You didn't lose a daughter tonight. Mother. You lost her yesterday in the lobby at 3:15 in the afternoon. You lost her the moment you threw $500 in my face and told me I wasn't worth the air I breathed. Veronica opened her mouth to argue, but the truth of it silenced her. She remembered. She remembered the laugh, the disdain, the feeling of superiority as she tossed the money. She realized now that that moment had been the most expensive transaction of her life. I looked past them to Tessa. She was standing near the wall, her arms wrapped around herself. She was not in handcuffs. She had handed over her phone. She had given the agent the safe combination she had chosen to survive. She looked at me. Her eyes were red but clear. There was no hatred in them, just a profound hollow sadness. I am sorry, she mouthed. No sound came out. But I saw the words.
I nodded her.
It was not forgiveness, but it was an acknowledgement. She would have a hard road ahead. Probation. Restitution. The shame of being a Blackwell. But she would be free. She had finally learned that the only way to escape the toxicity was to burn it down. Jones. Darius appeared at my elbow. The transport vehicles are outside. Do you have any final instructions regarding the subjects? Yet, I said. I turned back to Malcolm and Veronica. I reached into my clutch. I pulled out the single crisp $500 bill. The agents watched me. They did not intervene. They understood that this was part of the ritual. I stepped forward and tucked the bill into the breast pocket of Malcolm's tuxedo. Sat there. A green square against the dark blue silk, right next to his heart. You gave this to me as a severance package, I said. You wanted me to go away, to disappear. Malcolm looked down at the money. He looked sick. I am returning your investment, I said. Keep it. You will need it for the commissary. I took a step back, addressing all three of them. Malcolm, Veronica, and the weeping Gideon. I raised my voice slightly, ensuring that every person in the room, from the waiters to the billionaires, heard the closing statement. Yesterday, you screamed at me, I said. I mimicked Tessa's tone from the lobby, sharp and cruel. You said, get out of this luxury hotel. I let the words hang there for a second. Okay, I said, my voice dropping to a tone of absolute finality. Now you all get out. I pointed to the door permanently. I turned to Darius. Protocol slate. Final phase. Enter Malcolm, Veronica, and Gideon Blackwell into the global security database. Status no trespass if they set foot on this property or any Stonehaven property worldwide. Again. Arrest them on sight. Understood. Joan. Darius said. He signaled the agents. Take them away. The agents began to move. Malcolm slumped, his legs dragging as they pulled him toward the exit. Veronica began to wail, a sound of pure despair that echoed off the high ceilings. Gideon just stared at the floor. Broken. The crowd of guests parted like the Red Sea. They pulled their skirts and tuxedo trousers back, terrified of touching the fallen family. The class they had paraded, the legacy they had boasted of fell away like cheap gold plating, revealing the rot underneath. I watched them go. I watched them disappear through the double doors, flanked by the yellow windbreakers of the FBI. The doors swung shut behind them with a heavy final thud. The room was silent. Then slowly the air began to return. The tension broke. The guests looked at each other, then at me. I did not stay to answer their questions. I did not stay to accept their sudden hypocritical apologies or their business cards. I had no interest in their validation. I turned and walked toward the side exit, the one Darius had held for me. I walked through the service corridors down the back stairs and emerged into the main lobby of the Ivory Crest Hotel. It was quiet here. The banner celebrating the 30 years of excellence had already been taken down on my orders. The marble floor was clean. The fountain was bubbling softly. The night manager, a young woman named Sarah, was behind the desk. When she saw me approaching, she didn't look at me with suspicion. She didn't reach for the phone to call security. She straightened her blazer. She stood tall. She smiled. A genuine, respectful smile. Good evening. Jones, she said. I stopped. I looked around the lobby. It was the same space where I had been humiliated 24 hours ago. But it looked different now. The shadows were gone. The oppression was lifted. It was just a building. A beautiful building that belonged to me. Good evening. Sarah, I replied. I walked toward the revolving doors. I didn't have a suitcase this time. I didn't have a trench coat covering a broken heart. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the absolute terrifying freedom of the truth. I pushed through the glass doors and stepped out into the cool night air of Port Briar. The wind smelled of the ocean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. It felt lighter than it had in years. I had walked into the fire and I had walked out the other side. Not just alive, but reborn. I didn't look back at the tower. I just started walking, my heels clicking. A steady rhythm on the pavement, moving forward into a future that finally truly belonged to me.